So welcome to the Scottish Property Podcast, Lindsay Yuill from Rent Locally. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You've got a big backstory to tell us, so let's dive in. Let's get started. What attracted you to the world of property?
So I fell into property by accident, actually. So originally I did a degree in psychology and I was working in the social sector.
I'm interested to see where this is going.
I worked at Moorhouse School in Bathgate, and then I worked for the 15 to 24 project in Edinburgh. So that was kind of helping young people aged 15 to 24 get into education, employment and further training. And it was a similar kind of client group to what I'd worked with in the previous job. So we grew that to about 5 staff and about 200 young people across the centre of Edinburgh. And then our funding got cut. So that was back in kind of 2007. When
was that government funding?
Yeah, it was. It was obviously funded by Edinburgh Council, but that was when they had the equal pay scandal where the men and the females had been on the same band but not getting paid the same. Right. So projects like ours got cut to back paying those kind of people.
Pay the women up to their male counterparts. All right.
So we've come a long way in 20 years, haven't we?
But that was basically, that type of job you needed to be police checked. So it was quite a long time between getting a job and then actually being able to start a job. So I started working in a letting agency temporarily, and then I got headhunted and I set up an agency for a Glasgow company. So I set up their Livingston branch, ran that for a year and then set up myself. So
what was that about going yourself that you wanted to do it for you? Did you not like the way it was getting run, or did you think you could?
I was running it, so it wasn't that. I think it was more just it was quite easy. I didn't find it that difficult to do.
What do you know about lettings? I always ask Nick this same fucking question. Like, what is it?
I think it's the meeting people, the new people all the time, meeting new landlords and meeting new tenants, because you do get a lot of kind of banter and, that kind of thing. So that's the bit that I like about it. But actually, like, the letting per se part of it is farmed out in my company to other people. So I don't really get involved too much in the day-to-day running.
See, when you set up yourself, did you steal all the landlords from that previous company that you helped build?
No, I didn't actually. I didn't.
Because that is a fear. That's a fear I've got. Like, if any of my staff are listening to this, like, not that I don't trust you, right? I've got a great team, but you've always got that in the back of your mind. What if they go and set up themselves and take all my landlords?
Well, especially because a lot of letting agents will run it through one team member will manage 100 properties, and they'll have a close relationship with portfolio landlords. So it could be quite a risk.
Yeah.
How did you get your first clients in?
Just networking, really. There wasn't really a lot of property networking back then, so it was just business to business. So it was just the kind of local groups that were in West Lothian at the time. So I just really kind of went round them, and then went round mortgage brokers, tried to build relationships, went round some solicitors, tried to build relationships with there, and then paid referral fees or got referrals back, reciprocal relationships, really. But I would say 99% of the business, and that's from day one till now, has always been networking. It's always been like relationship building, or if a landlord gave us a property, then their brother would give us one, then their sister would give us one. Like, it was like that kind of, the network just kind of grew like that. But that's probably where I would say the bulk of our stuff's come from.
And before you scaled up the letting agent, did you start buying your own properties for your own portfolio?
Not initially, because when I set up my own company, it was 2008, so it was right at the beginning of the crash, which was a great time for me from a learning perspective, because I found it really interesting watching some of the really entrepreneurial landlords we have traverse through that situation. At the time, I set up a debt company and another company, which was Tenant as well at the time. So that kind of came off the back of...
But hand in hand,
trying to help some of our landlords that were having a problem with the financing back then. So that was a good learning curve for me, and that happened at a point where, no, I wasn't investing back then, definitely not.
Panic about it because of what was going on, and
but I think that sometimes people panic with change, but from my perspective, when you put a non-emotional head into the scenario, it's a lot easier to kind of trade out.
Right.
And I think that's where we worked quite well with some of the landlords, because we were able to not be emotional about it and go, right, we can do this, and this. There's different options here.
Solve the problem without being too emotionally involved and too panicky about it.
Exactly. And I think it's the same with any of the changes that come in, like when people heard rent freeze, moratorium of evictions, there was a mass panic about that. But the reality of the situation is most landlords haven't put up rent for years and years and years. So, what's the drama? If you're not put your rent up in the last 5 years, what does it matter if you can't do it now?
Was it very competitive back then? Because I can remember a lot of estate agents that then couldn't sell properly, then all of a sudden just bolting on letting agents into their estate agency practice. So was it quite competitive?
I don't remember it being massively competitive, but I was in West Lothian, which is a small area. Right. Obviously, Edinburgh or Glasgow, as like Nick would maybe be able to give you a better idea, it's a much bigger market and they're absolutely much more competitive. But in a small area like West Lothian, you're maybe 1 to 10. Right. So it's not a massive.
Back in 2000, did you say 2008 that was? Back in 2008, mate, I had nothing to do with lettings.
You were still
I was in my media career as a photographer for a newspaper. So yeah, totally different thing. So I wouldn't have a clue what was going on in lettings back then. But when you started that business, was it yourself or was there other people involved?
So originally, I was under a different brand then. So I had my own letting agency, and then in 2012 we did the merger with the boys. So they had their own agency in Edinburgh and we had our own agency in West Lothian. And basically what had happened is we'd both grown to a certain point and then plateaued. So we were at a point where we were at capacity with inspecting properties, rents coming in, etc. I really enjoyed doing sales and wasn't able to really do any more sales because we were at the maximum capacity. And they were the same.
When you say sales, you mean estate agency?
Well, just letting and estate agency sales. So letting and estate agency sales. So
just bringing on new clients. Or?
Yeah, exactly.
You mean, right, okay. That sort of side of the business.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the boys, they were much more enjoying the roles of finance, operations, and like MD. So that was the 3 roles that they had. So when we put the 2 companies together, it meant that mine could be managed by them in terms of like the maintenance and the finance and everything like that, and then I could manage the sales side, and that worked really well. So
that's quite a big jump. I'm just thinking there, right? So these 3 guys, they've got their own business. So you're getting involved with 3 guys that have got, and you're just yourself.
Yeah, but we were both about equal sizes at the time.
Right, okay.
So we both put the 2 companies together and became a bigger company.
Aye, because that's quite a big, for me, I'm like, wait, how does that all work? I mean, you don't need to go into details, but it's like, you're a bit outnumbered there, aren't you, in terms of decision making and stuff like that. You know, there's 3 that have built up their own company, and then there's you, you know?
Yeah, but I mean, What
did they see in you, do you think? That's the opportunity.
I think they just saw that they probably recognised they were in the same boat as me at the same time. I think they probably recognised that we were all, we all needed to make some kind of decision to move forward, or whether that was employing additional staff or whether that was doing other projects. Like we both needed to make a change if we were going to continue to grow again, and that's what we did.
Well, it's worked out all right, isn't it? Because you're still in business with these 3 guys just now, so that's important.
Absolutely.
To know. 12 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, it's lasted the test of time. Yeah.
So many business relationships can go absolutely wrong, so that's good to hear.
I think we are quite good at working together because we allow each other to remain in their own roles. So for example, I don't get involved in finance, like the finance director runs that element. In terms of operations, Stephen runs that. Like in terms of the management of the company as a whole, John runs that and I run my sales team. So we each have our different roles, and I think it works very well because while we do cross over and have input in terms of like overall management of the company, each has their own individual department to run. So at the end of the day, there is crossover, but there's not. Like,
so did you rebrand at that point then when you came together? So
they were Rent Locally and I was Live and Let, and we rebranded as Rent Locally because, well, they cared more about their brand than I did about mine. For me,
plus there was 3 of them and only 1 of you.
You were outvoted.
So you were outvoted there straight away.
I think when you're merging a business like that, you have to look at the bigger picture and go, what's worth fighting for and what's not.
Does it really matter? Yeah. I mean, I find this number one thing. I probably got caught up in it myself when I was starting out. the name. Like I remember talking it over with my wife for like days. I was like, what? Like, and like the logo and stuff like that. Really, does it matter? And you see it quite a lot.
My logo. So my stepmom, she was at university doing art and design, and one of her friends did my logo for a bottle of Bombay gin. So it was quite So there was not a lot of chat about logo. It was
Tassel
like,
number
get
on.
it. I know it was a bit more like that, but yeah. Fly by night back in the day.
I know, and really these little things, they don't, in the grand scale of things, once you start,
Well, if you look at some other brands that you think, well, that's been a success, but you would never have thought a brand like with that name or that logo could be a success, but it's about the people that drive it, isn't it?
Just fast forwarding to today then, so how many properties, is it rent locally? Yeah. How many properties do you guys manage then?
So we manage about 2,200.
Wow.
So we do cover kind of the central belt of Scotland and then a little bit up towards Fort William and Oban. So we cover quite a large area. We've done estate agency as well. So that was another thing we do, on market sales and then off market sales as well, depending on the type of sale it is. We do a lot of landlord to landlord sales. So the estate agency side of the business isn't something we've massively grown. It was only really developed to deal with in-house clients, but it's kind of grown arms and legs because by default, friends and family give you property, and then their friends and family give so it has grown a bit bigger than we kind of anticipated, but it wasn't the original plan. The original plan was always to just do the lettings.
That's quite a bit of scale.
That's good. Yeah. And when did the property investing come into it for you then, was it?
So a good couple of years ago now, we originally started kind of investing with my dad and my brother, and we did mixture of different things, flips, keeping properties, holding properties. Don't really do commercial or anything like that, so it's just really residential. And then just over time, I've done some different things with different people. So obviously me and my husband have some stuff, other siblings and various, kind of wee projects like that. So yeah, just kind of developed over the last, I would say more so, back in 2011 was really when we first started, but I would say more so the last kind of 5 to 10 years has been where the biggest actions have been taken.
But the buy-to-let, so you got a buy-to-let portfolio, have you?
Yeah. So,
Sorry, I need to ask this question. How many buy-to-lets have you got?
So, at the moment, we've got about 30. So, we do quite a lot of kind of trading. So, we flip some as well and sell some as well. So, we don't keep everything that we do.
Kind of restructuring and things like that?
Not necessarily restructuring, just as a strategy generally. We don't hold everything that we do. We've always been like that. It's always to generate new deposits for other stuff. We've always just done it that way and not relied on other people. So it's just a strategy that we've done for the least risk to us, effectively. So
and do you still believe in buy-to-let as a good investment strategy? Please say yes.
I do. I actually do. I think what you need to be now is much more careful with what you're buying. I don't think just winging it is a good idea at the moment. I think you need to really drill down your numbers, and you need to have multiple strategies for exit. So, that's why when we're always looking at a property, we look at, can it be a buy-to-let? Is it a flip? Could it be an SA? Could you sell it to the council?
Do you think like the kind of lower end stock, like the ones that people would have bought a few years ago when fucking anything would have rented, that you're struggling to sell those properties? So it really has to go to another investor that's going to pay even less for it or haggle with it? Thinking owner-occupier properties?
I probably wouldn't say so. I think so what we found recently, because the rents have gone up, actually, the yields in some of the lower end areas are actually a lot better than they were. Like, the rents they're covering the cost. So obviously we don't know what's going to happen in the budget in October, and that might change stuff for people. But I think with buy-to-let, people always need houses. Like, there's not anybody. It's like the one thing that no matter who the market is or what the person is, that they're always going to need a property. So I don't think it's dead at all. And I actually think the government probably need a lot of support just now from investors to keep it's especially with 12 councils in housing emergency.
Have you got a stock that you like to keep hold of, that you like to hold? And a certain area or a certain property type, or is it just?
I personally like 3 or 4 bed houses near a good school, get a nice family and that's going to stay for years and years. That's, low noise, like low turnover. That's the type of things that I like. The 1 and 2 beds, as you know, are transient all the time. They're turning over all the time. And for landlords that are starting out, 1 and 2 beds are the obvious choice to go for because they're cheaper to buy. But I think once you get to a certain size and stage, you need to really diversify into, bigger properties that, are less noisy and turning over less.
Yeah, makes sense, yeah.
You're talking about the housing emergency there. Something that we are working on the podcast here is we're getting in the politicians and asking the questions and all that. Yeah. So we just had the Labour shadow housing minister in there as well, so it's hot topics at the moment, isn't it? And we never really thought as letting agents that we get dragged into the whole debate that much, but it's become so.
I would say I agree with you, the last 18 months has been intense from a letting agency perspective. Like, we've never had issues before where we've had such a desperate set of clients looking for property. Do you feel there's been a big...
Absolutely, yeah. To the point of where I was sharing stories there about people at desperation point and all that. It's no nice. It's really murky at that end. And we're talking about,
both sides,
ultimately we're business people, right? We want to make money, but there is also that human element.
Absolutely.
Where you're like, God, so it's becoming, you want to be that ethical person who's doing the right thing. And ultimately you want to provide a safe, secure, clean home for somebody. But it gets to that point where through no fault of our own, as private landlords, we have become that kind of like sort of sector that's easy to point a finger at, like it's all their fault. Greedy landlords, it's all your fault.
I know. And unfortunately, if there's additional taxation brought in October, as a business, like, the costs have to be covered. And then, there's only 2 ways to go if you get additional costs: reduce your cost or increase your revenue. And in a private let situation, we have no control over the interest rates. We have no control over the legislation. We have to comply, like, that's the law. So all the safety certs need to be put in place, and they cost what they cost. And any remedial works that needs to happen as a result of the certificates needs to be done. So the only thing that really arguably could be reduced in cost would be insurance if you shop around, but at best you're saving £5 to £10 a month.
Minimum. Yeah.
So when a taxation comes in that's significant, the only way to recover that for a landlord is to increase the rent. And to do that when there's 12 like councils in housing emergency is only going to be a disaster.
And it feels that bit unjust, but what other choice have you got, like you say?
Yeah.
See, this potential, you brought up the budget there, this potential of capital gains tax going up. That's going to be the next thing. So, if they do that, and the rumours are that they are, that's going to have quite an impact as well. Because if you think about it, right, people were offloading, selling. Are they now going to just hold on to their properties? Because, these are landlords who are probably wanting to sell, but they're like, God, I don't want to sell now because I'm going to be hit with a huge tax bill. So then that has a negative impact as well, because you've got landlords that are no longer wanting to be landlords, kind of like trapped in the sector, that probably are like grudge every single maintenance and repair bill, that are no wanting to upgrade their properties. So again, it's like stuff like that will have an impact longer term.
I think there's been a fundamental shift in the market. So like, we did a Freedom of Information Act with landlord registration numbers in 2019 and again in June. And what we found was like probably about 50,000 landlords that had one property have kind of exited the market, but instead like about 50,000 landlords that have multiple properties have entered the market. So it's been a complete and utter shift that in the last couple of years. And what I find with investor landlords, and I don't know if you feel the same with the guys that you work with, but I find with investor landlords, they're more than happy to do the compliance. They're more than happy to do the repairs. They just want a decent property for the tenants to live in. They want the tenants to,
treat well respected.
Exactly, because if they give them a decent property, then you don't hear anything from the tenants, in terms of negative complaints or anything like that.
One landlord, he's based in London. He's bought quite a few properties now. And he says to me, because we've got Fixed Flow, right, which is the maintenance reporting system.
I hate that from a user point of view. I hate that.
Your email box is like flexible. Right, so this is a conversation.
Spam.
This is a conversation that we have with a lot of landlords, because everyone's different, right? Some people want to know every single thing that's going on in the property. Some people, like yourself, are not wanting to. That's just another job, having to read the emails. So we had a conversation with this landlord. He's like, unless it's more than £700, I don't want to know about it.
Yeah.
I was like, that's the type of client we want.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? So we're obviously, turned off the notifications for his emails, and he doesn't hear from us.
Yeah.
And obviously there's an element of trust. We've built up that trust through working with him.
It's like you say though, it's as you refer to it as the invested landlord. It's not the landlord anymore. It's the invested landlord that they've exited the market. They've no longer got one property in it. They've got multiples. They're taking it considered as a business. Like, my fucking mum's a nightmare. My mum divorced. My mum and dad split up about 7 or 8 years. She's got a property in her own, and she met her new partner. So I got it compliant, and I put it to Craig Holmes for Hip Properties in Kirkcaldy. So he managed to have a cracking bungalow and stuff. She comes back from her holiday last week and comes trying to fiddle about with this iPad and bring up an email from Craig, and she's going through spam. She says, I didn't know how to use these emails, but he sent me through this quote to approve. And honestly, it's like she'll scrutinise everything. Anything's been spent, she's asking me, and I'm like ignore it. But she can't, because it's one property. £800 or £850 a month comes in. So as soon as there's a repair bill, it's like, what the hell? But so this is the EICR. That's been 5 years ago since it's been let. New EICRs came in. There's a £1,400 bill for checking it. So she's freaking out, and I'm like, this is the people that you need out this industry. You need them gone, because that's, like you say, it's that if they're using it for their income or they're seeing it, it's one or two, and it means a lot to them. Whereas if someone's got a business and that's as a portfolio landlord, you take that as part of this.
I think that's the thing, when a landlord is a business owner, typically they have other businesses as well. So there's normally a business that has been created in the first place, which is then given them the residual income to buy a property. And when a landlord's in that category, quite often they do want to be hands off, because they've learned through their first business that systemization, scaling, processing, like making it passive, is what really the goal is, or what it's all
leave
about.
Leave the professionals to it. Don't micromanage.
Exactly.
And that's a really good point, actually.
Versus the one. So I'm assuming, as a letting agents, your jobs will be getting easier now that these landlords are exiting the market and investor landlords are coming in it.
Don't know about getting easier. It's not.
Like you're
I
trying
would
to
say
sell me this
probably the
hard
last
shit.
18 months has been the most challenging.
We do work for our money,
like
don't
the
we?
last, I would say so.
They had to
It's
justify
been-
that to us, I suppose, their listeners.
It's not just money for old broke. You know what I mean? Which most people, people look at their factoring bills and they go, what am I paying my factoring for? They probably look at the letting agency fee as well.
So let me ask both of you a question, because I keep hearing questions getting asked in the group as well about the lead testing.
Yeah.
People are asking about it because it's so new in it that we've not really seen any scary stories or anything come up. Have you guys had anything?
We've had 3 positive cases.
Right.
That's not bad out of 2,000.
But we've not had all the results back yet, because Scottish Water are backlogged. But we have had 3. So 2 of them have been in massive tenements, and they are logistically have been a nightmare to transact, because you're having to get consent from everybody in the block. And it's,
how many's in the block roughly?
so one of them, there's 12, and that's the biggest one. And so it is really complicated, because you're trying to track down the owners, and if the owners aren't local, or if it's not owner occupied, then you're trying to track down the landlords and then the agents that are looking after them. So that's been a bit of a mess.
And is that the letting agent's responsibility? Because technically, is that not a factor in job?
If there's a factor.
Well,
if there's a factor, then I would say.
Well, it falls down on the problem is, because it's legislation now, it falls back on that the owner, landlords, because he has to comply, and he has to do everything to try and ensure they get to the source of the root problem.
So what's the one in the block of the 12? What was it? Came up positive then. So what's the solutions?
We're still working on that one, because it has been quite a long process, but we have had one which was a 4 in a block, and that was a much easier process. So that one tested positive. We contacted Scottish Water, obviously they'd done the test, so immediately they were absolutely brilliant. So they've supplied water to everyone in the block. They tested everyone in the blocks. Now find out it's in the entire street and the school at the end. So it's grown arms and legs. However, Scottish Water went out immediately and started their dig within a couple of days. there was snags along the way. Like when they were digging, they found a lamppost which needed to then be disconnected. So there was, just general issues along the way. And that specific property, that Toby serviced 16 properties, which is quite unusual because most of them only serve a couple.
Why I want to call 1 or 2 blocks.
But this was an old historic street that hasn't been touched obviously since.
So what was the cost implication to the landlord for that then?
So far we don't know yet because Scottish Water have done their bit. And then because it's a 4 in the block, the 3 other properties are council owned. They've retested their water, found it to be safe and have stood down. Now technically the legislation is if you can't get majority, then you don't have to do it. But what we're doing is the internal pipe work in the property anyway, regardless, and then we're going to retest the water and then see if it's within the safe level at that point or not. But the council retests have come in at 2.8 and the legislation's 10 is so anything above 10 is unsafe. So we were at 11. So we're just over and no more.
Is that Scottish Water job? Does that get billed back to the government then?
So the Scottish Water's only responsible for the street, they're up to the Toby.
The main stock.
I was saying but there's a whole load of properties on that street plus a school. So that school's government owned.
They're only responsible for the street up to the Toby, and then it's the responsibility from the owner from the Toby to the property. Now in this case, it would have been split 4 ways. But the council have stood down on their 3 because their water's now safe. So they're now going to go into a management project where they're just going to manage, retest it kind of every 12 months or so and see. But the property that we've got feeds the one upstairs and they've tested at 2.8. So I would say that the likelihood is ours would be safe. But because we're in the private rented sector, it would just make better sense to just remove the pipes completely. For all it is that's in the property, it's under the sink.
Have you any idea what the cost implication is though for the owner? What's the
probably if it's just internal pipes and there's not, I think there's a bit beneath the floor, so again you're not talking large lengths of pipes, probably a couple of £100 maybe. If it was a massive garden though and a massive dig required, you're probably talking a couple of thousand. So it just depends on the location of the property, and then if it's grass garden or concrete, if you're ripping up monoblock, the cost's going to be significant.
Yeah,
I mean these latest repairing standards. There's also a thing now that you have to have a front door that's on the close, that's you can lock, and it's
lockable in the corner.
Who's the thing is, it's some of these things that they come up with. It's that property's been there for 120 years. There's been no door on it. But now all of a sudden we need to put a door on. The world has become so unsafe that we need to now put a door on with a lock. And it's it's most of these buildings that don't have a door on the front are not factored. So then it becomes let's get all the owners together. The chance of that is almost impossible. So how far are they going to go to police that? I don't know.
I wonder what the implications for that one that you're talking about there, though, if it wasn't council owned, if it was owner-occupier or if it was other landlords, how much difficult would it have been trying to get a solution where then if you had to pay for something, a communal pipe in, would that have been
I have to say what the council had said was that it would have been a 4-way split and they would have paid for the 3/4 of the dig, and then because the feed came from the lower flat to the upper flat and it serviced their flat, they would have paid 50% of the internal pipe work as well.
Right.
So they actually were pretty reasonable. But what the message they said was they're getting a massive push from above to eradicate all lead. So the government protocol is if you find it, get it out, and the public purse will pay for their element of it, and then the rest has to be owner occupied. But from a responsible letting agency perspective, you need to, if you find an issue in a property, you need to address it.
Yeah.
And that's a message that needs to go out to the landlord, really.
It's interesting, isn't it, how far the government go with this sort of stuff, and then how, really if I moved into an old property, right, this might just be me, but if I'm moving into a tenement flat, I'm not thinking to myself, oh my God, when I go for a glass of water here, is there lead in the water supply? Do you know what I mean? And the majority of tenants aren't thinking that. We don't take any questions like that at all. Nobody's asked about lead. But yet, you know, it's become legislation. How far does it go? You know,
Yeah.
what's going to be the next thing?
Well,
Right.
what the council had said to us was like the levels that was in their water now is kind of like the same as what's in a bottle of mineral water. So it's, you know, like, but I think they're just, this is a mop up, isn't it? Because
So
they
you
did
had
a
said
big
to me
project.
before about the fact that no one's ever died in Scotland from lead poisoning.
No, I've never said that. I have no idea.
I'm sure someone.
I've no idea if that's true or
A
not.
letting agent. I'm going to go and fact check this now. But I'm sure a letting agent says to me that no one's ever died of lead poisoning in Scotland ever. So
I don't know that.
I think that maybe the government should be more focused on, if they're worried about health risks and the pressure on the NHS, then they should be focused more on cleaning up people's diet, maybe, and like, you know, educating folk on healthy eating and giving people free gym memberships, maybe, rather than giving us more legislation to test our water for lead and stuff like that. Aye. Anyway, rant over from the letting agent's point of view.
it comes down to
Give
the
us some
same-
positive stuff, Steve.
I can't. But it comes out the same thing as well about the houses that we're renting are more safer than the houses we live in, because we don't have to do that in our own homes.
I don't mind it to a certain extent.
I don't either, but I think it should be the blanket approach. Every house gets tested.
Yeah.
Not every private rental sector house gets tested.
Yeah.
I
Same with the
think
smoke alarms.
But it was kind of like that with the smoke alarms, wasn't it? They brought it into the private rented sector
10 years
first,
later it
and
gets
then
brought
they've-
in it.
yeah,
Like,
it's a bit of a rollout.
So
isn't
why
it?
is the owner occupier less important than the private rental sector? Like surely if it's a safety concern, because I mean, if I'm working in the oil and gas industry before property, I don't get a choice to say, oh wait a minute, Nick's life's less important than mine, so he can not put that harness on before he works at height. Like it's a blanket approach to safety.
I think it's more the public liability element, isn't it? Like when you're a landlord, you're responsible for the safety of the people that are in your property. So if they report, for example, a carpet at the top of the stairs is loose and you don't fix it and they fall down the stairs and break their leg, then that's your responsibility to compensate for that. So I think that's the difference between owner-occupier. It's your own choice to make your property safe or not versus
I think it's this more drive
duty.
to the drive to kind of, you know, flush out the rogues as well. You know, the more stuff they can bring in, the more they can get rid of
more
the
gets in
bad,
it,
the bad apples. You know, but
No, it's a good point. Good point.
business stuff. Can I get back onto the day-to-day operations of a letting agency? There will be people interested in this. Like, I do get DMs on
10
Instagram
letting
saying,
agents
"Oh,
that
I'm
listen to
thinking
this
about
podcast."
starting up a letting agency," or like, "I'd quite like
What's
to
your
get."
advice in that
I'd quite
scenario?
like to. Well, you're the guest. I'm asking you the question. What would you say to a young person starting out that might be interested in starting up their own letting agency? Do you
I'd
think it's a
say
good
be brave.
business?
Yeah, it's a bit of a minefield. If somebody was wanting to start up their own letting agency now, it's completely different to when I set up, because the legislation's changed so much over the last, number of years. So when I set up, we didn't even have a deposit scheme back then. You were able to manage your own deposits and things like that. So I think the regulation's good to a degree. Like I do agree with some of it. Like I don't think any landlord's going to say it's not, I disagree with doing a gas cert or anything like that, because, it is a safety thing. But I suppose it's like anything, you just need to learn the rules, learn the ropes, but also be open to change, because these legislation changes come in all the time. Like I think there's been about 10 new changes at least.
That's what we said, we've had one a year pretty much for the last 10 years, at least.
How do you remember that point when you grew the business, when it was just yourself, to, what was it? I think you had 80 or something like that, you said.
No, so we had about, I can't even remember, I think we each had about 200 properties.
Oh, right.
Bigger businesses together,
So did that, because I've managed to get a few people now, I've built a wee team and stuff like that.
Yep.
Definitely got easier. I mean, like if I roll back a few years back when I was doing it all myself, I mean, I'd literally be sitting in here on edge like 3 years ago, phone and be like, I'd be like, "Stephen, I need to stop. What's going on here? Oh fuck, boiler's broken down. Wait a minute till I get on." It's
exactly.
like, it definitely gets easier with scale. That's what I'm saying.
So
Do you remember the early days?
Yeah, so we built our own software system because a lot of the software systems we were using were quite open to human error, and we felt that there was a lot of duplication in the business. So like, for example, with every property you need to do a gas, electric and council tax changeover. So we were like manually typing out these emails every single time. And it's the same with maintenance. You're manually typing out the emails to landlords every time, like, do I have consent? Like, and it was the same, but the admin was insane. Like, as you're saying, especially in winter, if the boilers start going, it's not just one, it's like 10 that goes at the same time. And it's like but there's only a couple of engineers free. So it's like, how do you prioritise who gets fixed first type thing? So we built our own software system, and we've automated quite a lot of the repeat stuff, which has been massively important in our journey to scale.
Because is it something that you still use?
Yep, and it's something that we change and amend all the time.
Right, that's good.
Like, so for example, when they're in
technology and stuff like
exactly
SMEs came on board now that they didn't want you to replace it with that. Yours has been sufficient to keep growing.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely. Good. And it's because we've got our own control over it, we can amend it whenever we want. So for example, when the rent increase, the 3% or 6% rule came in, we just had a minuscule little build, and then it's just an easy calculation, which was not open to human error, because it was just they put in the 3, that was it, send a notice, job done kind of thing. The systemization of our business was the number one thing that took the biggest headache away. Honestly, from the calls just stopped going as much when we gave the tenants a dashboard and the landlord a dashboard with all their stuff on it. So we analysed the business at the beginning and said, right, what is it that we take calls on? What is it that we do on a daily basis that's taking up loads of time? And it was all things like, can I get a copy of my lease? Can I get a copy of my inventory? And so we've just given them all a dashboard and all their stuff's on it.
So transparency online.
So we just teach them how to use it at the beginning. And that's kind of really part of the sales process, is we teach them how to use the dashboards.
What other systems you use? You built your own one, but have you got other ones you use as well? Is it everything just in this one that you use?
It's everything just within the one. So
we
really?
don't,
so we
referencing
don't.
And everything
No,
like
not referencing. So we use Let Alliance.
Right,
We use Let Alliance for referencing. So they do all the credit.
What about payments and all that? Do you have somebody who deals with all that?
It's not automated all of it, but basically what happens is when the first payment comes in, we train the system to recognise it, and then as long as the same payment comes in thereafter, it will auto bank it each month.
Right.
But if it was an anomaly payment, like, so say for example, it was supposed to be £500, but only £400 came in, then we would have to manually input that because it was an anomaly. Or if they were to pay the 100 separately, we would have to, but if it was the same amount standing order every month, then we can auto. And that's been massively important in saving to staff time.
because the tenant's inputs a certain reference that recognises with that property as well.
Well, we teach it on the first one. So we manually key it in on the first one, so that the bank then recognises it, and then it's just basically plugs into the system. So the only thing that we need to manually input is new payments or anomalies. Or like, for example, like we've got a maintenance account. So if a landlord pays a lump sum for maintenance, it's going to cost more than the rent, for example. That's a manual process. But for all the kind of repeat stuff, anything that we can repeat.
How about building the team? Because obviously that's great that you've got the systems and the tech there, but obviously there's a big human element to lettings as well. Building that right team.
Yeah.
How has that been over the years? Getting the recruitment right, and what are your top tips to find the best people? So
obviously I did the degree in psychology, so part of that was like disc analysis and all that kind of stuff. So we have kind of used that through our recruitment, and kind of, once you understand the person's personality type, you understand the right role for them. So if they're a process person, they're going to do really well in finance and maintenance, but maybe not so well at sales. If they're a creative, chatty person, they're going to do much more better at sales than they are potentially at receipting rents. So finding the right people for the right roles is a management job, in my opinion. If I mismanage that process, then the person's not either going to be good at their job or enjoy doing their job.
Do you do the hiring at the moment?
Yeah, we do.
You do the interviews and that?
Not all of them, but through the recruitment process, we do a couple of wee tests with the people that we recruit as well. So we do a little typing test, which is online, it's free, and it grades them on efficiency and speed and things like that. So for the people that need that as part of their role, that's quite an important part of the process.
I put a job up recently because we're hiring somebody else, right, full time, lettings manager, property manager, and I use Indeed, but this time I put it up, and I don't know, I've maybe put the salary up a wee bit, right, so I'm paying a decent wage now. The business is doing well. I want to basically incentivize the staff as well, and hopefully staff will stick about a bit longer as well. That's the idea. Don't just want to go minimum wage. It's just don't think you'd get the best people. I put this job up. Honestly, I must have like 250 CVs sitting there, and you're talking about the emails from Fixflow. I get these emails from Indeed. I'm just like, I just can't face these. Like, how the hell? So what I did was
recruitment agents.
Aye, well, that's right. I mean, that's literally what I probably need to do.
Yeah.
Maybe just pay somebody.
I think that's the thing. Like, if it's not your bag to recruit, if it's not like where you're comfortable with your skill set, then pay somebody to do it, because they'll do it better than we would.
That's a good shout, actually. Have you ever used a recruitment agency?
Not personally, but only because we've actually been quite lucky with the recruitment that we've done. So everybody's actually in the right role for them.
How do you do the vetting then?
So it depends on the role. So obviously if the role's like receipting rents or something, or rent chasing and things like that, it's got to be somebody that's really, really good at processes, that likes doing repeat work, because if it's somebody that's not right for that role, they're going to get really, really bored, and their attention to detail is not going to be there. So it really needs to be a detail-driven person that does that type of role. But like property management, that's a completely different skill set from processing. So that needs to be somebody that's like happy to meet other people, like they're meeting people every day, that are happy to ask questions to people they've never met before, like they're trying to screen tenants as they go and things.
So do you, in your business then, the model that you go down the route of, like, you know how you, like, well, with me, I basically assign one property manager who deals with everything, so they know that property inside out. They do the inventory, the maintenance, they deal with the landlord, they deal with the tenant, so it's one point of contact for that property, right? So if you've got a portfolio, you've got the comfort that you know that person knows exactly what's going on with that property. How do you work it in yours?
So we have property managers that are specific to each property, but we have a maintenance team and we have a finance team.
That's good.
So our maintenance team deal only with maintenance all day, every day, and our finance team deal only with finance all day, every day. But because our system is automated in a lot of ways, every time we update the jobs, the property managers get an update as well.
Right.
So when we update the client, the property managers basically get a copy in. So they know exactly what's going on with maintenance and finance all the time. But their jobs are more inspections, inventories, move-ins, viewings.
Do you have in-house maintenance at all, contractors, or do you subcontract?
So we have one handyman that's employed solely by us, and the rest are subs. The rest are subs. But we quite like having one in-house, because it means that if there's any emergency situation, but if there's anything that happens that you think, oh, we need somebody to just drop and go, like we've got the control to do that when we've got our own in-house person, because we can move them off other stuff and onto like urgent things. Whereas when it's a subcontractor, you're at the mercy of whether they have capacity to fit in any more work, or whether they're willing to like, they've maybe booked their jobs in a circuit, so they might think, well, I'm not going to deviate over there because actually I've got my jobs. The last
final piece of the puzzle that I've not been able to systemize or delegate in my business is the emergency calls yet.
Well, we've not took an emergency call for a couple of years.
Well, there you go. So how do you do it?
So I'll tell you exactly after the podcast, but we've basically got one of our maintenance companies. They do a lot of our out of hours emergency stuff anyway, and they have system access, but only to the maintenance notes and the contact details for the tenants. So they can have they've got a very low level access to the system. And then
an emergency come through, it goes to them.
It goes it goes through them. They troubleshoot, and 99% of it they can fix over the phone.
To be fair, I think it's got a lot of I mean, like, I think if it's not touch wood, like, I'm going to jinx myself now. This weekend when I'm away up to Inverness for the September weekend, I'm going to get bombarded. But very rarely do I get like a proper emergency. No. Maybe the tenant thinks it's an emergency.
But you can talk them down and talk them off. It's not that important. We can fix it.
Whereas we're talking about short term lets, everyone's an emergency.
That's right. Short term stuff, isn't it? Different kettle of fish.
So your own portfolio, what's the plans for? In fact, let's stick with the letting since we're there. What's the plans for the growth of the letting agent? Are you still looking to keep growing and keep expanding?
Yeah, so we are. So we grow in a couple of ways. Obviously, organic growth, so just getting on new clients just as they come in, but we also do business acquisition as well. So we have purchased a couple of small agencies over the last couple of years, and that's been far faster to expand than just organic growth, because what I can achieve or what my sales team can achieve on an individual basis, one landlord at a time, is far less than what you can achieve by just buying a ready-made book in the same space of time.
Yeah. So that's still part of the strategy going forward? Still part of the strategy. And then there's a couple of areas that we don't cover that we would like to cover in Scotland. So, and then, just expand throughout, really. That's good. And for your own portfolio, what do you think the plan is? That still a plan? Still expand and grow, still do some flips and things like that. And just business as usual, really. So you're not put off by to let and expanding the portfolio and anything that's going on? No, I mean, which is good. I think it's like anything, right? You get lots of bad press for landlords, but also lots of bad press for tenants. The truth of the matter is 99% of landlords are fine and 99% of tenants are fine. So, generally speaking, it is a relatively safe market to be in. It's a market you can insure every part. You can insure the building, the contents and the rent. You can insure the public liability element. So everything is insurable with, if you were doing stock market or whatever, then it's win or lose. Whereas with lets, you can protect yourself in a bit of a better way. So put our listeners in the shoes of somebody who's, running a letting agency at 2,200 properties. That's a significant growth of business. Yeah. Are you sitting having brunch at 10 a.m. and then in the sauna steam room for midday and all that? What's your day to day? It's not always like that, Nick. No, it's not like that at all. Actually, by 10 o'clock, you've normally had about 30 calls. So What is your day to day? Give us a wee insight into your... Well, my job is sales, so I'm not really involved in the day-to-day running too much. Is that bringing in new business then? So bringing in new business. So whether that be new landlords, whether that be new properties for sale or business acquisition, that's all my role. I guess training staff in that department as well. So it really just depends on what's in. But our peak season really is April to October, so that's been pretty busy the last couple of months. But I would expect it'll kind of taper off towards Christmas. I know. I actually feel like we need to. We're getting worked at the moment as letting agents. We used to last year, and again, Ireland's coming out. This is last year we'd go out and do one viewing. And that was it. Property rented. That's it. Easy. Yeah. Now it's we're 5, 6 viewings, 7 viewings. We're still not getting some of them let out. Yeah, I think it depends on the area that you're in as well, though, because all the areas are different. The demand's different in different areas. So we're finding that some things are still absolutely flying, but you're right. Some things are slowing down a little bit, which is bizarre, really, when there's the housing emergency going on, because you would think it would be moving. Still the same. It's still a good thing though that the demand's still up a little bit. At least it's not crazy rent increases, because that was never going to sustain, and it was always just going to bring us into the bad light as well. So I still think, if you look at it, like we spoke about before, it's almost like it's balanced out. The fact we never rose rents for 10 years, and then the last 3 years has been 30% increase. It almost looks like it's went 3% over the last 10 years. I think the issue in the last kind of wee period of time there is that interest rates have gone up quite significantly. So some landlords have gone from, their rents have gone up by 100%. Sorry, not their rents, their mortgages have gone up by 100%. So, but then for every landlord in that category, there's somebody that's in a 5-year fixed rate that hasn't had any change in their mortgages, or there's people that, don't have mortgages at all. So I think it's been they've been able to keep the rents low, and the people that are buying now in comparison to 18 months ago, they're paying much more out to keep that property just at a basic level. So then that's just the mortgage interest, and it's been funny, because I would have thought the interest rates would have come down further by now. But they seem to be. They won't do it too much to mess with inflation, because they can't get control of it. What about your own buy to let portfolio? Have you got a loan to value that you stick to, or do you quite leveraged, or do you? I think the sensible option is to continue to drive debt down, and I would advise all landlords to do that straight off the bat. In my opinion, if you leverage up to 75% all the time, it's just... You're always going to be exposed a little bit. Yeah, are going to be exposed, whereas I think 65% or lower loan to value tends to be pretty recession proof, because even if the interest rates go up and down, they don't tip you over. So I would always advocate for somebody paying down debt, to be honest. I agree with that as well. Now, even looking back at the last crash, I'm sure prices dropped like 20% was the most. So like you say, if your loan to value 60, 65, you're always got that nice bit of buffer, whereas you're 75 and all of a sudden you've lost 20%, you're up at 95% loan to value. If the banks do recall on a debt or your fixed rate ends, then you're in a sticky position, aren't you?
Well, I think like this is where I probably learned a lot in 2008, because back then the loan to value was 85%, and what happened was the banks then dropped it to 75%, but then overdropped, like, so the house prices had dropped as well. So landlords were not only having to find the 10% deficit, but they were also having to find the dropped house rate as well, and that was achievable maybe with one property, but not with like 100 or not with 50. So I was kind of think you should keep your debt low and, you know, your cards close in for that type of thing, because we've seen that the bad way back in 2008, really.
I think it's only investors that I've seen 2008 that think like that, because I see a lot of younger investors now that come in and it's almost like, fuck it, leverage to the hilt, and they've not really seen. It's almost estate agents that have been in the market for 6-7 years. They've never seen anybody offer under home report. They're like, what? Like they just don't know it.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, like anything, markets are cyclical, so you're going to find that like in our lifetime, there's going to be peaks and troughs again. Like over the next 20, 30, 40 years, that it's going to change multiple times probably. I think the difference with 2008 to now is, like, there is money available. Back then, the banks didn't have any money, and that was the issue. So I think when you've seen how bad it can be, then absolutely, you're obviously making sure that like that doesn't happen, or that you're not in a situation where you get burnt, because, you know, learning from others' mistakes is part of growth, isn't it, really?
Absolutely.
Have you ever had to sack a landlord?
Not really. I mean, generally speaking, everything's kind of, if there is any issues, it's easy to resolve typically.
I was hoping for some stories there.
I
was gutted, right? Basically, I had this landlord who was an absolute nightmare, and he left before I had a chance to sack him. So,
what's your biggest arrears case?
Obviously, I don't really deal in the finance side of things, so I don't actually know. That's a bit embarrassing.
I think of these quick fire questions. That's quite a good idea. Just quick fire. Let's see what we can get cool answers.
Even with the $4,500 one, she started paying £50 a month.
It's never going to get paid off, is it?
7 years to pay it off at £50 a month. So yeah, I'm expecting like 2 or 3 months and then it'll stop. But yeah, that was the biggest one, and it very rarely happens, to be fair, because we've got pretty good processes, and
I think that's
most people are decent, I think, really, and you know, just, you know, people talk about nightmare tenants and all that. If you're doing your checks at the start, you know, you've mitigated the risk. Generally, people are decent.
I think 99% of tenants really try and strive to pay their rent, and, you know, there is some that have a situation that maybe happens and it's maybe like a life-changing thing, like maybe they're splitting up with their partner or something like that, or they've been paid off or whatever, and 9 times out of 10 they will get back in line and back
in that situation and communicating the stuff that I've seen arrears with, or the letting agents I've used with my own properties, is they didn't really communicate enough and help the tenant through that process, which is what I'm paying them to do. Yeah. And then you realise that it builds up, and because if you didn't keep track of it,
but there is lots of things available for tenants. Like, so if a tenant's circumstances have changed, they can obviously claim for universal credit and LHA, but there's also the discretionary housing payment fund, where if they have built up a pile of arrears through like a one-off circumstance, they can apply to get the full thing written off, particularly if they're at risk of homelessness. So in that respect, like, it really is the agent's responsibility to be telling them about that, you know, to protect the tenant as well, because 9 times out of 10 the tenant has just had a really bad run of luck, and it's not always deliberate, you know, it's often circumstantial. But
I kind of get that landlord now out of my mind, that basically he came to me with 2 properties that were totally uncompliant, and basically the red warning light, first of all, was he was trying to drive me down on price, right? So you know straight away that's always going to be a bad start. So anyway, I think we settled, we agreed. So I got his 2 properties up, fully compliant. Now that was a job in itself, because some of the fuse boxes needed upgraded and all the rest of it. So it was quite a bit of work, remedials and that involved. And then I think we managed them for about 2 or 3 months. We're still recouping some of the compliance back. And he phoned me up and he says, no, I'm switching to another agent, but I don't know what he did with it. I don't think he did go to another agent. And then we lost the management of it, and he still owed for the compliance. And I just wrote it off. I was like, you're a dick. But aye, so that was the one I was saying about. I probably would have sacked him anyway.
Is that one? Is that the stock that you kind of take on at the beginning of the business when you're kind of needing the stock and you almost don't? You're not as particular about the people that you work with.
Aye, I think that is a thing that happens when you're starting.
I think it probably comes down to experience as well. Like when you're starting up, you maybe don't realise like there is actual people out there that would do that. You know, like you think that you're quite naive. You just think everyone's like you and everyone's just going to do what they're supposed to do. But you know, it's just one of those, isn't it? But we don't. I'd have to say we don't come across too many like that, to be honest with you. But then the networking that we're doing is with people that are actively trying to grow, and they're in the room to learn how to do it right. So they're not in the category of people that just don't care what they're putting their tenants into. So I find the ones that we're dealing with largely are actually quite good. But again, it probably depends on the area you're in as well, as to what the kind of stock in the area is like generally, like in terms of like quality. So
good and bad in all industries.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
of course.
I've enjoyed the chat. It's a good chat with someone with a huge amount of experience as well in lettings and have their own portfolio.
Aye, it was a really good
Nice to
insight
meet
as
you
well.
as well.
Obviously, like you're a fair bit above where I am, so
But you know,
you've been a long time in it.
I think like the majority of letting agents are like, you know, are just quite a good kind of stock level and are just like, you know, churning like good numbers and, you know, keeping the books compliant and stuff like that. So it's good.
You know, had any offers from Lomond for any year?
We've never been approached by Lomond.
They're a big company.
They buy up all
basically
the small
sweeping up every letting agent over the country, pretty much.
Like looking at like cities that I've like operated in before, and I tend to go nowhere near the bigger agents because I always think that they've become too corporate and they don't. There's not that care. You know, sitting like all the listeners will probably agree. Sitting and listening to you two guys, you're compassionate about tenants and landlords and doing that best job. And as soon as you get to a corporate level where someone's buying up thousands of agents, like it's a fucking process, isn't it?
Well, it's a private equity fund, so they're not actually a letting agency brand. So they buy up all the brands around the country. They still operate them as the localized brands, but they're like the private equity
that owns them
at the top, just
but
owning everything.
They kind of just buy in cities and like the big. They're not interested in the little areas, are they? They're just interested in the big.
Mainly city stock, isn't it? Yeah. Anyway, cool.
Thanks so much. Where can people reach out to you if they want to chat to you?
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, give your company and your social media shout.
Red Locally and what do you want, email addresses or no?
However you prefer to be contacted.
Well, you do the sales, so you're looking to attract the landlords.
So if you just phone 0131 445 9900 and ask to be put through the sales team, then you'll catch us.
And that's brilliant. Thank you for being so honest and open about it.
And you'll see Lindsay at the Scottish Property Podcast Edinburgh event giving the rental market update because you're expert in that area. So it's good to have your expertise.
You're appearing at quite a few different networking events as well. You've been dragged into a few others.
I know. Well, that's just the podcast team now started last month. So
good.
So
good stuff.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lindsay.
No worries.
Cheers.
Thanks.